A lot of the stuff predictions we make in this video were made before Comic-Con happened, before things were announced or confirmed, before this year's Comic-Con. It was my lazy ass that just got around, never got to edit it in time. Yeah, but yes, we know we are late. We know it's been confirmed and whatnot. Peace. Frack on. Welcome to the episode of Frack the Canon. I am joined by the coolest motherfuckers around. I'm joined by CJ, my creep from Milwaukee. What is up, good sir?
Hello, sir. I'm sipping on my coffee and my Reese.
Yes, coffee. I need the elixir of life.
I mean, it is, you know.
All right, so we're gonna talk about something that just got released. Got kind of we've been waiting for. I've been waiting for since the invention of MCU. Mutants are finally in the Marvel universe.
Kamala, there's something different in your genes. Like a mutation.
And see, this was your idea, so let's start with that.
All right, man. Yeah, because I know at least everybody everywhere, but at least you and I specifically have been talking when are mutants gonna come, right? When is this gonna come from? And I don't know about, I can only speak for myself, right? But I just knew that we were getting mutants. I knew Wanda was gonna bring us mutants, right? I knew before WandaVision was over, we were gonna get mutants out of WandaVision. Didn't happen, right? I knew before Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was over, we were gonna get mutants out of that. Didn't happen. Although in both cases, we got a huge freaking tease at them.
Yes.
But no mutants, right? Like the closest thing was Multiverse of Madness, where we actually got Professor X. But again, it wasn't the 616 Professor X.
We should tell him the truth.
Our final member, Professor Charles Xavier.
Roll my eyes.
It wasn't that Professor X, and they never, called him a mutant. We didn't know anything about that Professor X if we didn't already know about Professor X, So everything about that Professor X comes in as baggage that we brought into the movie, but now here we are in a place where no one thought this. I mean, maybe somebody thought that this was coming. I don't know who thought that this was coming though. Nobody thought. Here's a character that is classically. Let me just say this, all right? Spoilers for Miss Marvel, okay? Freaking, even though we're already deep in and you can extrapolate what we've already been talking about, you can probably realize what already happened. But anyways, spoilers for the end of Miss Marvel, post-credit scene, you could call it. But out of nowhere, a character who has nothing to do with this side of the world gets announced that she's a mutant, and boom, we have the first mutant character in the MCU.
So let's talk about that, because I'm so here's the thing I feel about Ms. Marvel. I feel sorry for Ms. Marvel fans because she was I feel I'm not the biggest fan. I'm a fan of Ms. Marvel, but the original Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers Ms. Marvel. But I'm well, first of all, in the comics, her powers are she can Mr. Fantastic, she can stretch them and stuff like that, and she's an Inhuman. So I'm what's up with all the Inhuman hate, for lack of a better word? Because I'm first of all, Black Bolt gets taken down like a punk, and now this, I'm dude, that to me is like a slap to all. If there are any Inhuman fans out there, I don't know, but if there are,
I can say that I personally know at least 2 Inhuman fans.
Okay, but I'm dude, what's up with all the Inhuman?
But I know them. The crazy thing is,
I don't like the shooting her into mutant, because they did that again too with what's her face with Quake, with Daisy from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In the comics, she's a mutant, but they changed her to an Inhuman. So I'm what are you guys doing? Why? I guess the TV show, we never knew if they were canon or not. We still don't know. I guess we still don't know if the Netflix shows and the ABC shows are canon. So that's why I was exactly. You were saying, I'm sorry.
No. What you were saying is something that I was gonna start to kind of lead into anyway, right? When Kamala around the time Kamala Khan came out, that was like kind of when the MCU itself was beginning to gain ground. And I feel very much that like Kamala Khan, like not her herself, right? Not her herself, but they were using her as part of their initiative to kind of, they didn't have the rights to mutants to use them in their movies. And by them, I mean Marvel Studios.
Right.
Didn't have the rights to use mutants in their movies. And they were kind of like pushing this Inhuman initiative. And I don't know if you remember where they actually made in the comics Inhumans a lot more like mutants. Something happened in the story that like spread whatever makes you an Inhuman like around the world, and it basically made a bunch more Inhumans. Like
the Terrigen Mist.
Yeah, like, and it made a bunch more Inhumans like around the world, and they basically tried to do the mutant. They basically tried to make them the new mutants. They tried to do the mutant story over again, but with Inhumans. You know what I mean? Like Inhumans popping up everywhere, and people like doing the hate and fear you thing, like of Inhumans. That, you know, and X-Men was like, that was so 2004, guys. But freaking,
you're not wrong.
Right, but there's something about this that like rings the same way that did though. There's something about this in my brain that like that speaks the same way to the same thing that they did back there in the comics. And I'm like, so are you trying to do like a reverse with Kamala Khan? Like you kind of use this character to kind of champion the Inhumans, and then you kind of wanted to Inhuman wash over everything, right? And so now that the Inhumans,
I like that. I'm sorry.
Right? Now that the Inhumans didn't do so well, critically speaking, I guess, and maybe financially for them, now they have mutants back. They're like, well, I don't know what better way that, you know, all Miss Marvel has always kind of been, and I do mean Kamala Khan now, has always kind of been an all eyes on her type of character for Marvel, it feels like. And so now that they have her out in the MCU and they have mutants back, I guess it's like, well, why not throw her? I don't want to talk too much about the show Miss Marvel because like we'll have that on another episode. But like when we got to the end of her series, I did kind of feel like the themes in her, and it was at the end when I wasn't thinking this was as the show was going on, but when we got to the end, I did kind of think like, well, the themes of her series do kind of point towards mutants,
the X-Men, like the outsiders.
Like, like the themes that mutants have to go through, like typically in their story. So like, it was like kind of out of nowhere, but it also like, I was like, you know what, the show actually does push it towards this kind of an idea, you know what I mean, like of what mutants typically are and go through.
See, I didn't see that the first time. I watched it one time. I didn't see that the first time I watched it. I'm like, I just remember. Okay, we'll talk about that on the show. But I just remember being, interesting. I just remember it rubbed me the wrong way. So, you know, I guess like I've always been really, I guess I am a purist when it comes to comics. I'm like, stick to the freaking source or stick to the spirit of the source. You know, so I'm like, frack you guys for making her a mutant. Frack you guys. Like, why? Because I kept thinking too that thing, that portal they were going to. I'm like, oh, that's a Terrigen Mist that activates the her powers. That's what I thought about too. But I'm like, it's genetic, right? Because she was a djinn or whatever. I'm like, okay, on Earth, this is what activates her powers. I'm like, okay, that's me trying to be like, okay, that's how she becomes. She activates her power. But I'm like, no. When he said mutation, I'm like, maybe. And then because I like being Inhuman is kind of a mutation, right? But then the X-Men theme, I'm like, okay, frack you guys. That's kind of where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like, it rubbed me the wrong way. And it still rubbed me the wrong way. I just hate that. But my question is, if we see the mutants, are we ever gonna see the X-Men? And if so, where have they been hiding all this time? Or is this the beginning of that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like,
it does. The first mutant. Because I was going to pose the very same question to you, right? Like this, like, what does this mean? Do you feel like this means she's the first? Or like maybe they just she's the first one that this kid discovered in New Jersey, right? Like, you know what I mean? He just happened to do her blood and whatnot, and it like made and discovered that she's a mutant, right? Like people haven't been looking for this thing Haven't been like checking people's genes for like, hey, is this are mutants kind? I feel like at this point, the way that they did it, they could kind of do either, right? They could kind of do either where it's like, oh, okay, like people weren't focusing on mutants because the superheroes were a thing, right? Like people weren't focusing on mutants because they had, the Avengers to look at and look up in the sky. They were meant to be beautiful.
Somebody save me.
To look up and see that's the beam of light for everybody to focus on. So as they're focusing on these big Avengers and that happening, like nobody's really noticing like, oh, there's like people with powers kind of popping up kind of thing. You know what I mean? My other idea is there's very little that we know about the 5-year gap, the MCU 5-year gap. You know what I mean? There's very little we know about that. The things that we know about it are that an energy that the snap gave off was large and had great effect. An effect that was greater than snapping away half the people and bringing half the people back. Actually, there were 3 snaps because he destroyed the stones with 1 snap.
Yeah, that's right.
So 3 times the Infinity Gauntlet got used within a span of 5 years. 3 times this Infinity Gauntlet got used, and it had effects on the world, on the universe, right? Like, so there's like this huge gap where something like that has happened, and they can kind of dive into that too if they want to. You know what I mean? Like there's very little that we know about in the 5-year gap. Just bits and pieces that we see from flashback here and there. Usually we see a character that we're familiar with, like spawning back into the universe, kind of a thing, and like the craziness that they came back into. You know what I mean? But like, I don't think we've seen anybody. Hawkeye maybe in the 5-year gap. Not like during the 5-year gap. You know what I mean? I don't think we've seen anybody. Who?
I mean, the Avengers, right? The Avengers that didn't go away.
Right. Yeah, them too. But I guess we didn't really see them either.
Right.
Like we just popped back in.
I mean, my theory is for what they're gonna bring out, because I'm like, okay, the music is a way to bring in the X-Men, right? So I think what they're gonna do, again, just as the comic book fan, the comic book writer, I'm like, they've been in hiding this whole time. I think we're gonna get X-Men and the teenagers again, like in the comics. Like they just started running. That's what I'm thinking. I have no idea. I mean, maybe they might just be like, oh, like or the rumor is of what's it called? There might be a Secret Wars movie, and they might do it like the last Secret Wars 2, where just all the incursions coming in together, and them coming in like that.
The only thing, obviously, they've been setting up a lot of. They've been setting up a lot of multiverse things, so like I feel like Secret Wars is certainly doable. The bad thing about Secret Wars, at least in the first Secret Wars, right? Like if they wanted to call back to that, there were a lot of villains involved. And MCU has a freaking villain problem. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like it's a lot of their villains they even get rid of. They're like one and dones in the MCU, you know what I mean? Like, so you wouldn't be able to do that aspect of it, I guess, but and you can't, like, they can't do Endgame twice, you know what I mean? Like all those elements they brought together to make that work, like I believe in Marvel, the MCU. I don't believe they could do that again. Like they could do something similar and on a similar scale. I'm not saying that. They're Disney. They got money. Yeah, they could do something on a similar scale. But the way that fit together and came together like that, like they can't do that again.
I think the next big thing they can do is Secret Wars, and that's it. I don't know how after Secret Wars, I'm like, you're done. Stop making movies, Marvel. But
right. But it's because of that I don't feel like we're going right into Secret Wars. I feel like we might get Avengers versus X-Men before that.
Okay, yeah. Because here's the thing about mutants too. And so the rumor is, so back to mutants, back to the topic. The rumor is that there's going to be, what's his name? Namor. He's going to be in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Mm-hmm. In the comics, he's the first mutant. So I'm like, is this another mutant we're setting up? Like, is this another way to bring them in? Like, but again, we've seen that MCU is already cool with like mixing around origin stories, especially with Kamala Khan. So I'm like,
yeah, yeah, she's a freaking Green Lantern.
she is. She really is.
She's a freaking Green Lantern. Which I don't hate that either, right? And the thing is like I'm speaking as someone who is such a mild Kamala Khan fan. You know what I mean? Like I'm such a mild Kamala Khan fan that like I know nothing about her comic book anything except for that she was an Inhuman. You know what I mean? Like I know that much, but
I know too.
I know nothing about any like this show. The show that she was in could have been a complete and utter like F you to the original comic creators. I don't know that. I don't know because I haven't read anything that has her in it. I haven't even read any comic that has her in it. You know what I mean? So like I don't. So I wouldn't know. But you know, I don't know. I'll save this for in between because I don't. But yeah, the mutants. Here's what I think. Like I think her being a mutant doesn't mean she's going to be an X-Men.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, like I think her being a mutant is really just like to say, "Hey, mutants are here" to the audience. But I don't think she's going to be an X-Men because number one, like her family loves her too much, and most of the X-Men, like that's not a thing. Like most of the X-Men are like they're like Bobby's parents. You know, have you tried not being a mutant?
Oh my god, that scene always like, oh my god, that moment. I got to an argument with my cousin about that scene. I'm like, we'll talk about that later too. But, yeah, anything. I'm excited for mutants. I'm a purist. So I'm like, Kamala Khan should be a human, not a mutant. But I just like, no, you know what? No, I won't accept it. I hear the thing. I don't like how they did it. Here's the thing too. Who is this kid that he has the access to have groundbreaking blood working done to tell if something's a mutant or not? Where's he getting that money from? Is he Peter Parker?
I had the same thought. Like this kid, like why he's like the resident genius of the neighborhood because everybody keeps going to him throughout the show for all this crap. And I did think that was super weird at the end when he's the one that comes and tells her. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, you got a lab or something? Like, who are you, child? Who are you to be able to come in and tell her this? You've been studying her blood with what? Like some freaking Target science, my first scientist kit or something like.
To quote the Gen Zers, my guy, where'd you get that from?
All right, like the internet. Like what? Like you got an app for that for detecting freaking mutations in people's DNA.
Any final comments? Any final thoughts?
Why do they have to do the guitar riff? You know what I mean? Like, could they leave it at just the mutations? You know, it was already winkety enough. You know?
I know it really was. My final
like, okay.
Yeah, that was on the nose. Like they did it also with Doctor Strange and the multiple different. I'm like, that's cool. And it made sense with Professor X for them to use that. Here I'm like, oh, frack you guys. Oh, hell no. I didn't like that series. My favorite is Evolution, but I'm like, how dare you besmirch Ron Wasserman?
That was the obligatory eye roll that I gave you there. But
wait for it. I think Evolution was my favorite over original series.
Yes.
We've had this conversation. Ooh. Okay. We'll talk about that later. I'm like, how dare you besmirch Ron Wasserman, the creator of the Power Rangers theme song, the X-Men theme song? How dare you guys? Power Rangers SP. Anywho, I just like that was it. I'm like, I hate that she's a mute, and I hate that they use that riff at the end. I'm like, oh no, oh no. Okay, well, thank you, CJ. Thank you for doing for this episode. We'll see you same fracking time, same fracking channel. Frack off.